This program airs statewide on California Public Television and is a California's Gold classic. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. It was the largest migration of people in American history. Between 1935 and 1940, over 1 million people left their homes in Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri. They were escaping the drought, which had literally transformed their farms into dust bowls. In search of jobs and a new life, they loaded their families and their few possessions onto cars and trucks, and they headed west for the Promised Land. They headed for California. They became known as Okies, and when they finally did reach our state, they were not exactly welcomed. Many were stopped at the state line. And those who did make it soon discovered there were too many workers and not enough jobs. They ended up living in squatter communities, in living conditions that were atrocious. It was a bad situation. But then, in 1936, the United States Farm Security Administration started to build 12 worker camps in the San Joaquin Valley. By 1937, 10 of these camps had been completed. Now, they certainly weren't anything fancy, but they had flush toilets and hot showers, breakfast for the children, tents, and later cabins to live in. One of these compounds was named Arvin Federal Camp, located at the base of the Tehachapi Grade, about 15 miles south of Bakersfield. Because it was situated on Weedpatch Highway, from the very beginning the Okies called this place Weedpatch Camp. And it was this camp John Steinbeck visited and eventually used as a setting for his famous novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Today, the San Joaquin Valley is still one of the finest agricultural areas in the world, and migrant workers are still in the fields. And also today, if you're on Highway 99, heading north to Bakersfield, and you take the Arvin exit and travel down the Weedpatch Highway, and then turn off onto even a smaller road, and then turn again, you'll find yourself at the original Weedpatch labor camp, which is still in operation after all these years. As you drive through the camp, you can see the concrete slabs, which were the floors of the original tents and cabins. There are new cabins in place now, and the camp residents these days are Latino. But visiting this camp is like going back in time. And to go back in time, we invited some of the original Okie residents of Weedpatch Camp to come back for an afternoon to share with us their stories, their memories of the camp. Does anybody recognize this lady here?
Georgie Rush. Oh boy. How you doing, Georgie? You're looking good. You're still looking good.
Earl.
Chewy.
Remember Chewy?
How are you? Well, I grew up here.
Really?
I started in the cabins, and I ended up in the apartments because I moved up as I got older.
Well, what was it like living here?
It was wonderful. Some of the most treasured memories of my life.
Now, why do you say that?
Well, because we was happy. We might have been poor, but everybody was happy. All the stories you hear is you know, we all picked cotton, picked potatoes. I didn't pick a lot of potatoes, but I threw a lot of vines, which was harder than picking up potatoes.
When you say throwing vines, what does that mean?
Well, I went before my mother and I picked the vines up off the potatoes and shook the potatoes off and threw them out of her way so she wouldn't have to do that, see, so she could make more money.
Everybody was the same, and there was just everyone worked hard, and in order to make a living.
Now, when you say worked hard, what do you mean?
I mean, everyone worked. This was a place to live, but we also had jobs in the fields mostly, but everyone worked. When we were too small to pull a cotton sack, you went ahead and picked piles for your parents.
We'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, head to Cuyama Valley, and be there by 6 o'clock and go to work. Or we'd go to Antelope Valley, or we'd go to Alpo, that's above Early Mark, and all over Shafter and Edison.
So work would start early in the morning.
6 o'clock and sometimes earlier.
Was there any work that people would refuse to do if it came their way?
No work. They worked. My family, tomatoes, cotton, grapes, potatoes, you name it. Peas, exactly. I don't care what it was. Sweet potatoes, everything. Worked. Carrots, yes, sir.
So you did it all.
Did it all.
Now we're going down to
The old theater and dance hall.
the old theater and dance hall. Now this is one of the few remaining buildings at the camp, right? Original
it's a
building.
historic old building. In fact, we're looking toward restoring them. That's the goal. We almost lost them to the problems with environmental concerns, lead-based paint. We were supposed to have torn them down several years ago, but we negotiated a settlement that involved putting chain link fence around them to restrict and limit access to them so we could keep them preserved as historical buildings.
So you knew it was important to keep this thing.
Oh yes, we've hosted so many scholars coming here from the Bay Area, Cal Berkeley, down south over the years. We've had German National Cable here. We've had Dutch Cable. All of these people, all looking at the history of this, the old Steinbeck era.
Now this is the original. Who remembers this place?
This was our recreation hall. We had Sunday school, we had crafts and all kinds of things.
Well, let's go inside and take a look and see what we got in here.
Huell used to be movies on Saturday and church on Sunday. That's right. And dances occasionally at other times.
Now what's the condition of the place?
Well, the condition of the place, it needs restoration, and that's one of our goals. This, of course, was a stage. I think bands were up here. If you can turn back your imagination clock, you can imagine a Western band playing here and dancers here. At one time, there were basketball goals in here, and people used to play basketball, I understand.
So this place, when you would have activities here, this whole room would be full of people.
Full of people. Yeah, Christmas time, I mean, you know, chairs, benches, all in through here, but it was basketball, hobby center, it was just a community center for the camp.
How does it feel coming back?
Oh, I haven't seen this inside of this building. It really brings back some memories, honestly.
Now we've come here behind the auditorium to what looks like may have been one of the original 10 houses that you lived in.
That was our basic tin cabin that all the transits, or what they called transits and Okies, lived in. We had the tin cabins, and we had what they called a tent circle that was all tents. And then the elite people lived further up on the other side of the camp in the houses.
Didn't these things get hot?
Yes, they got hot. That's what I said. I don't. But when you're a kid, I guess you don't realize how hot it is. But because I don't remember being that hot. But you know, a lot of times at night we sleep outside. You know, we just throw our little cots outside.
This is like, used to cool.
Sir?
See these metal flaps, how they stick out? They had a window screen underneath. Well, we used to put the sprinklers up on top and let the water run down over it, and then the wind would blow through. That'd cool the building.
Because this building, it's hot.
A lot of good memories here. It's the first time I've been out here in 30 years.
Really?
When I got married, I left here, and this is my first time back since then. So it holds a lot of good memories.
Now, how did you prepare to come today? What was going through your mind?
I didn't expect to see any of this. I thought it had all been destroyed. I'm surprised of the cabin, and everything looks so different. You know, we came earlier, we drove through, and I told my husband, I said, gee, if we'd have had places like this to live in, we'd have thought we was in heaven.
Now, Paul, these are two of the
original buildings.
Yes, they are in Huell. In fact, the one on our left, the larger one, is the old library, which housed a collection of books during the Dust Bowl days, has since not been functional as a library. And the smaller building over to our right was the original post office, which was a functional post office for many years.
So this was the original post office?
Yes, in fact, in the Steinbeck novels, there's, reference to these buildings or their equivalent.
Now, gentlemen, do you remember the old post office?
Oh, definitely we do. This was the post office. Used to come down and get our mail, and used to get a letter from a sweetheart once in a while. My mother would intercept it and get it tore up before I could receive it.
Whoa! You got a story to top that one?
Well, this was the building you used in that movie, Grapes of Wrath. That was the office in the movie.
Really?
Yeah.
So they actually filmed some of the movie version of the Grapes of Wrath right here.
That's what keeps getting confirmed to us. And I wasn't fully aware of that. I have heard that. That's been represented to me over a period of time, and I've heard it so much today, I think it's validated.
In 40, coming in the gate, there used to be a big dip. And that dip you see in the Grapes of Wrath was right there.
Really?
And that was to slow down the traffic. You was doing every bit about 15 coming down through there in your Model A's.
Now, do you remember much about the library?
Yeah, we used to check out our library books, Zane Grey and whatever, to read during the off hours. And
so the kids used the library?
Oh, yes, they did. Is either that or the radio.
You remember it?
That's all we had, was the library. I remember the grocery store more because when I lived here, we had gas stamps. Gas was rationed, and you had to have your stamps for gas, for sugar, and my older sister, once in a while, she'd get a coupon for some hose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember the store more than I remember the library.
So you were spending more time shopping than you were reading.
Well, I just remember the store
What
more.
I remember about this place, it had the only phone in the camp. And
the library did?
Yeah, and it was here on the porch. And if you got a phone call, they'd call you over the loudspeaker to come to the phone. And it was an old crank phone, too, that if you wanted to make a call, you had to crank it.
Well, they're going to restore these buildings.
Really?
Yeah, that's what you're working on, right?
That's the intention. I've already gotten some money raised to do the first stage. Will be probably when the weather cools down. I'll be calling upon former residents of the camp and community people with some construction background to help reshingle. We want to reshingle them so that there won't be any more water damage to the interior for this winter. And then we've already been doing some consulting about the kind of original siding and wood, and the structures are strong. And we've got a lot of work here, but I think it's a matter of either preserving history or not doing so, or having it lost.
Well, it's definitely part of history, isn't it?
Yeah, there's another one of those original cabins that we lived in, and we were fortunate enough to have two of them.
What do you mean?
That tin cabin right there, that's the original.
Yeah, that was a cabin, I understand, that was added on to expand the post office. The post office was originally...
one of the original tin cabins we've been hearing about.
Yes. The cooling system that you had was the flaps. You'd raise it up, and if there was any breeze, you got cool, and if there wasn't any breeze, you did without. Wow. And that's all there was.
Now we're walking over to the edge of the camp for a very important part of the story. I'm here with Dr. Jerry Stanley, who's written a book about this place. Tell us why we're here and what used to be right over there.
Well, one of the most important things about Weedpatch Camp was what was called Weedpatch School at that time. And it started about 1940 when the Okie kids that came from Oklahoma and Arkansas and the southwestern states were generally kicked out of the public schools or forced to sit in the back of the classrooms. And,
why was that?
Oh, they looked different, they talked different, and their poverty was pretty much visible. And most of these kids have been out of school for 3 or 4 years, and they couldn't read, they couldn't write. And in a way, you can't blame the teachers. I mean, they were really far behind 2 or 3 years, but the point is they were mostly kicked out of the public schools. And so what they did is end up building their own school, and you see it right over there. It was called Arvin Federal Emergency School. 1940, 1941 is when they built it. They built the classroom buildings, they built a swimming pool, they built a runway for their airplane they had in the school.
Wait a minute, what do you mean a runway for their airplane?
Well, they had a C-46 airplane here, and they practice auto mechanics as well as teaching math classes and English classes inside the airplane. And maybe the most remarkable thing about the school, this is still the Depression, is within a couple of years these kids planted part of this 10 acres out here, and they made their school completely self-sufficient in dairy products and meat and vegetables. It's quite a remarkable story.
So in a way, this school was one of the forerunners of what we call magnet schools today, or schools that are very advanced.
I suppose you could look at that, although they wouldn't know what the word magnet means. The point was that they just didn't have anywhere to go to school, and if it wasn't for a man named Leo Hart, he was superintendent of schools at that time, and he was the one that got this school started. He leased 10 acres of land from the federal government for $10 and borrowed a bunch of boards and pipes and wires and just told the Okie kids to get to work, and that's what they built. And
so you mean the kids built their own school?
The kids built their own school along with the teachers. They helped. To be a teacher here, you also had to be a carpenter, or a bricklayer, or electrician, or something. And it took 3 or 4 years to do it. They built the first public swimming pool in Kern County. And you see much of these kids around here today. They went on to become judges and PhDs, and one of them is an international marketing consultant for IBM, and they really had successful lives. But they did it themselves. It's the sort of the bootstrap approach to education.
I remember through this gate over here, in the mornings, the girls would come through with their nicely starched, pressed dresses, and the boys in their clean Levi's, and it was about the best bunch of students you'd ever want to have.
But they were poor, weren't they?
They were.
Financially?
Yeah, but they sure took care of themselves, and we never had a discipline problem. If we happened to, why then the people would be disciplined when they went home again.
Yeah.
When the parents heard of it.
Now, didn't a lot of these young people have to work in the fields as well? How did they balance working with going to school?
Even the fifth graders, they might have gone out in the field right after school was dismissed, and they went over the fences and carried their cotton bags with them, and they worked out in the fields hard during the school year and also during the summer months.
Wow.
Yeah, they picked fruit, and they worked hard.
Well, there is a school there today, a new modern school that is serving the children of the camp today. So the cycle continues.
Yes, it does. That's called Sunset School. None of those buildings, of course, are original buildings. The school was leveled in the earthquake in 1952, but rebuilt, and it's still called Sunset School, and it sits there on the site of former Weedpatch School.
Still serving the residents' children of this camp.
Still serving the residents' children of the camp, right. It's mostly in the camp now is Spanish-speaking, but they still go to that school faithfully as Okie kids did 50 years ago.
Now, what's going on over here?
Well, they're showing today's generation yesteryear's Dust Bowl. This is a little lesson in history.
Just explain to them how we,
their camp,
what we lived in, and this is where they're today, and was showing them the tin cabins and the school, and also the tent cabins that we lived in. I showed them.
So they've probably never seen pictures of what the camp used to be like.
Never. I'm sure they've never seen it. No. They act like they was pretty interested, huh? And that swim pool really got their attention.
Now, this is all very exciting. We're beginning to get some music going here, and I'm standing here with Seema Weatherwax, who has heard music in these camps before, haven't you?
I sure have. I've heard it from one of the masters, Woody Guthrie.
Now, you came to one of these camps back in 1941 with Woody Guthrie. What was that like?
Well, I can see the outlines of what it looked like because it had the houses now are placed somewhat like they were then, but they were all metal. They were not wooden like they are now.
Right.
But I have an idea that one of my pictures shows the office, which looks exactly the same as it used to then.
So you took pictures on this trip here to the camp with Woody?
That's all I was doing here. I was wandering around the grounds while Woody was playing his guitar and having crowds of men around him. The women were busy taking care of children in the nursery schools and in the different places, but it was mostly men. And I was busy walking around with my camera, just shooting things that I thought were interesting.
Now, what surprised you the most about the camps when you visited them?
It was the most pleasant surprise to me was the order in which everything was, the feeling of belonging that the people had. It was, the people had pride in the place. And it awakened me to the fact that if people get a chance to have something that felt like their own, you see, it was self-government in the camp. It's one vote, one person, and the people were running the camp.
What were you expecting when you drove up here with Woody Guthrie?
I rather expected to see sort of large tents or something like that. I really did not expect to see an orderly housing development, because I hadn't read enough about what was. It was fairly early in the time that they started this. It was only a couple of years that they'd been running these kind of things, and before that people were living anyhow. Yeah. So when I came here and saw the order, saw the pride and so on, I was really overwhelmed with it. I was overwhelmed with the feeling when I met people. They were very proud that they had the place, they had a place to live in, they could look around and they kept it the way they wanted it. And these were the things that surprised me the most and really made me realize what it means to have people do this, to have this kind of a chance. Because right outside the camp, I have photographs of what was happening right out of the camp, where people were waiting to come in here, and they were living in squalor. They were living in shacks, they were living in dirt because they had no incentive. And so when I walked in here and saw what was going on here, I said, this is it. It can be done.
Yeah.
You know, I realized it could be done. Before that, it seemed almost hopeless.
Can you remember what you and your husband and Woody Guthrie talked about on your way home back to L.A. after spending a day here?
We didn't talk, Woody sang.
I've been having a hard time, a hard time. I've been having a hard, old hard time. Every day's just the same, not a nickel to my name. I've been having a hard time and a hard time.
It changed California.
In what way?
Well, when people come here, we was called trash, but before we left, we didn't leave. Some of us, but before they got through with us, was pretty good workers. Yeah. They found out we was all right.
We were Okies, and Okies were treated different. And people don't understand that, but to be called an Okie back then was an insult. And today we're proud of it.
So is everyone else. Yeah,
what more can I say?
Yeah.
It's just a good way of life. We're proud of everything we did and everything we stand for. And I think a lot of other people are starting to understand that now.
When you say everything you stand for,
poor people, people that rise up from nothing and become something, those type of things, we have accomplished something in our life, and I think that's important.
Lots of folks back east, they say, are leaving home every day, beating the hot and dusty way to the California line. Across the desert sands they roll, they're getting out of that old Dust Bowl. They think they're going to a sugar bowl, but here's what they find. Well, the police at the port of entry say, you're number 14,000 for today. Well, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, boys, you ain't got the do-re-mi. Well, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Tennessee.
If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727 and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.